Good evening. Good evening. On behalf of our nation's central bank, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone joining us online or in person this evening. My name is Darren Peschel, and I'm the Regional Executive for the Houston branch. Thank you all for joining us for the Dallas Fed's Global Perspective Speaker Series. We convene this series quarterly in locations across our district, which consist of all of Texas, northern Louisiana, and southern New Mexico, and we're delighted to host this edition in Houston. We have an excellent agenda ahead, and I'm very much looking forward to our conversation. For those of you that are less familiar with the Dallas Fed, we are one of 12 regional reserve banks, led by regional bank presidents, who together with the Board of Governors, led by Jerome Powell and 6 other governors, make up our nation's central bank. Collectively, we serve the public through 5 key functions. We conduct the nation's monetary policy, working to achieve full employment and stable prices. We promote stability in the financial system. We supervise and regulate financial institutions. We support a safe and efficient payment system. And we foster community development. One of the key attributes of the Federal Reserve is our federated structure. Leveraging our regional strengths across the 12 regional banks and 24 branches fosters two-way communication by convening business and community leaders to share real-time perspectives on the economy. Many of these business and community leaders serve as Dallas Fed directors and council members. I'd like to acknowledge the many of you joining us in person and online this evening. Thank you for your service to our nation's central bank. The contributions received through those board meetings, council meetings, outlook surveys, roundtables, and one-on-one calls enhance our understanding of the unique challenges and opportunities of our region. They add depth to our understanding of complex and critical economic issues and ensure that our analysis is inclusive of perspectives all across our district. In short, our relationship with the community is cornerstone to our work as a central bank. In this spirit, the speaker series was designed as an opportunity to convene business and community leaders, economists, policy leaders, and Federal Reserve leaders for conversations on the issues shaping our world. To that end, we will have a Q&A portion later in the program. At your seat, you have a QR code. And so I invite you at any point this evening, you can take out your phone, scan the code, and ask a question. Lastly, I've mentioned community and partnerships a great deal tonight. So it's only fitting that we have one of our key partners hosting with us this evening. The Greater Houston Partnership is a flagship institution here in Houston that represents over 20% of our region's workforce and is at the center of many of the visionary and innovative initiatives in our region. Partnerships with organizations like the GHP exemplify the Fed's motto and commitment to building a strong economy together. And I'm pleased to have Steve Keen joining us this evening to help advance that sentiment. Steve Keen joined the GHP as a CEO in 2023 and has been a tireless partner in helping build a strong regional economy ever since. Before taking the helm at GHP, Steve was the CEO of Kinder Morgan, one of the largest energy infrastructure companies in the nation. Steve is a perfect moderator for this evening, and he will introduce our featured speaker and guide us through the rest of this evening. So with that, please join me in a warm welcome for Steve Keen and Gretchen Watkins.
All right, thank you so much, Darren. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of the partnership and then ask Gretchen to introduce herself. She's our chair, and give you some background, and then we'll do a Q&A, and then we'll take questions from you all. So the Greater Houston Partnership is, back in 1989, the Houston Chamber of Commerce, the Economic Development Organization, and the World Trade Center were put together in one. And so this is kind of the leading business organization in our metro area. As I've come to find out, that's somewhat unique in the country, the way this has been constituted. And it's broader, though, than the business community. We have for-profit, not-for-profit, public sector, and private sector all involved. And what that's enabled us to do, and we're nonpartisan, so what's enabled us to do is bring people together from all of our leading institutions in the city to work on big problems, big challenges, big opportunities. So we do all the traditional work of a chamber in convening members and connecting members. We do the public policy work on behalf of the business community. We had a very successful session in Austin this year. We do the economic development work, et cetera, but we also bring people together in Houston to get big things done. All right, so a couple examples of those. Our Houston Energy Transition Initiative. This was put together about 5 years ago to make sure that Houston continued to be the energy capital of the world. I see some of our board members here, I see some of the people who participated in that work. That work has been very successful. We count over 300 startups now in Houston in Energy 2.0. So that's one. Workforce development is another one, and we're going to get into that a little bit because Gretchen has been a big part of that work that we've done at the partnership in the committees and as the leader of the partnership now. And so that's about connecting the people in our community with opportunity. We create a lot of jobs in Houston. Our economy is a juggernaut. On a normal year, we're creating between 50 and 100,000 net new jobs. We also graduate about 80 to 90,000 students from high school. But 6 years after high school graduation, only 20% are making a living wage. That's just not the way things get done around here. So our big challenge is to connect up the people with the opportunity, and I think we can do that in Houston. I think we can do that in the Greater Houston Partnership. The other big area of work for us right now is resilience. So we get hit by storms here. We've actually done a very good job over the years of learning from each of those and investing and getting better. And I can show you how that's happened and that we can measure it, but we need to get better still. We have to keep the critical systems that make life normal for Houstonians. We have to make them either not go down or come back up quickly. So that's the work that we're doing at the partnership, and I'm delighted to be working with Gretchen as the chair. Gretchen recently left Shell USA as the president of Shell USA, and she is serving as our chair and has served on some of that work that I've mentioned. So, Gretchen.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve. And Lori and Darren, thank you very much for inviting us here tonight. It's really a pleasure to be with all of you and see many familiar faces, but some that I haven't met too, so look forward to meeting you later. My name is Gretchen Watkins. I am, as Steve said, the chair of the partnership, but up until a couple months ago, I was the president of Shell USA. I also ran Shell's global shales business for the first couple years I was there. I was with Shell for 7 years, this is a 35-year career I've had in energy. Prior to that, I actually was the CEO of Maersk Oil and Gas. I was based in Copenhagen, Denmark for that. I managed to see through the sale of, excuse me, of Maersk to Total, and that's the point when I joined Shell. I did my first tour of duty in Houston prior to Copenhagen. I was with Marathon here in Houston for about 5 years. And then before that, I actually started my career at Amoco. I'm an engineer. I started as a facilities engineer working in New Orleans. First 5 years of my career, I spent quite a bit of time offshore in the Gulf of Mexico. I'm going to absolutely date myself by saying this was pre-deep water, so this was all the shallow shelf stuff, but it was a great way to start a career. I learned a ton, and I really fell in love with an industry that I feel is really one that does great things for the world in many ways. And so it's been a real honor to have worked for some absolutely great and amazing companies, to work with outstanding people, and to, frankly, to have lived and worked in 6 different countries throughout my 35 years. It's been great. In addition to all that, I have an amazing husband who's not here tonight, so I'll say it without him here. But he has basically been the full-time dad to our 3 kids, and in addition to ending my full-time executive career, which I'm not going back into full-time work. I'm looking to build out a board portfolio and continue to do some of the great nonprofit work that I've been able to do. But we have 3 children, and so we're also new empty nesters. Our youngest has just started as a freshman studying engineering also, chip off of the 2 blocks, because both of my husband and I are engineers. But it's really, again, a pleasure to be here. It's been a delight to be involved in the Energy Advisory Council with the Fed, but in many other ways in the city of Houston and beyond. So, Steve, thank you very much for letting me introduce myself.
Thank you. Thank you. You did better than I could have done. I could do most of that. I could do most of that, but not all of it. So, very good. From your position as the chair of the Greater Houston Partnership, I talked about some of the work that we're doing, but how is Houston doing? Like, how is the Metro doing right now from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, the Metro's actually doing great, and I think there's sort of two sides to this coin, because you rattled off a couple of good things and a couple of bad things, and we're going to cover both of those, I think, in the next little bit that we're talking. But right now, the Houston Metro is the youngest metro of the 10 largest in this country. So we have about 25% of our population is under the age of 25. So a really young community here that says a lot for, I think, the future of the city. We've also grown that population by about 4% over the last few years, where we've seen other cities actually contract. So that same demographic has contracted. For example, in Chicago, we've seen that young demographic contract. It's growing here in Houston. We're the second strongest job growth market. Steve mentioned we've had, I think, just in the last couple of years, 275,000 jobs have been created in the Houston region. We're second only to Dallas. I know we've got some people in the room from Dallas, so two big Texas cities that are creating lots of jobs. We're also the top export region or metro in the whole country. Last year, we exported $181 billion worth of goods through the Port of Houston. And if you add up the amount of export from New York and LA, we have done more here than those two combined. And New York and LA are number 2 and number 3. So it is, as you use the word juggernaut, it's a great word to use because there's just a lot of economic activity here. There's a very young population here. But we also have a very unique demographic when you look at the topic of immigration. So 25% of our population is foreign-born, and 30% of our workforce here in Houston is actually foreign-born. So we have a very, we call ourselves the most diverse city in the country, and you can see it, the numbers really support that. This is the one that's really interesting, though. In the last 3 years, 75% of our population growth has come from migration. And of that 75%, 85% of it is migration from outside of the United States. So we're seeing a huge influx of people into the city from other countries. And then about 15% is from the US. So a little bit of movement from other parts of the US, but a lot of influx of people from outside of the US, which I think implies and indicates that all of the immigration talk that we've got going on right now, any change to immigration policy will impact our city, either positively or negatively. We also have the second lowest, the second most affordable city, the lowest cost of living, second most affordable after Minneapolis. And all of that to say, when people come here and say, oh, should I relocate my company here? I'm looking for a new place to invest. This has a lot of great things going for it. And so we have been able to attract some great investments even in the last few months. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that. But probably the biggest one is Lilly Pharmaceuticals announced a $6.5 billion investment in a new manufacturing plant that was just in the last couple of months. And when you look at Apple and NVIDIA, they're working with a company called Foxconn to build several new manufacturing sites in northern Harris County. So lots of both opportunity, but actually real money coming into the city right now. So I would say with all of that, Houston's in pretty good shape.
It's nice to hear some good news nowadays, isn't it? Really? I mean, yeah, things are going well. Things are going well in Texas, I think, and things are going especially well in Houston right now. So mentioned economic mobility, workforce development. I'll just say we had an event last week, I think it was, maybe it was 2 weeks ago now, but Economic Mobility, a summit. A number of organizations co-convened a group. At that event a year ago, we had 300 people. This year we had 1,000. And so these organizations, the academic organizations, the public service organizations, the business community are getting together around this idea of economic mobility and how we can affect that stat that I gave earlier. Why don't you talk about economic mobility generally, why it's so important, and what can the business community do to lean into this?
Yeah, one of the things I loved about when I stepped into the chair role at the beginning of this year was that Steve and his team had come up with 2 strategic imperatives that he talked about earlier, resilience and workforce development and economic mobility. And I love the fact that we're not just talking about workforce development, but we're also talking about how developing our workforce and developing our talent actually enables economic mobility. It enables people to move up the economic value chain in their life. And if we do it right, it enables us to really raise up or move forward all parts of the city together. You said an amazing statistic. I'm going to say it again because every time I hear it, it's so shocking. We have data that shows that after 6 years, the kids that are graduating from Houston public schools are only 20% of them, or really less than 20% of them, are making a living wage. Less than 20% of our graduates are making a living wage. If that's not a burning platform, I don't know what is. And so this effort, I think that the partnership is leading, but that we really need all of our business community to come together on, is in fact looking at how do we connect the dots between the things kids are learning in high school, the opportunities they have to go on to, whether it's a 2-year program or a certification program or a community college or a 4-year program, leads into a really healthy job market where we have businesses that are saying, we need you coming out with your certification in whatever trade it might be, or this 2-year associate's degree or this 4-year degree, we need you. And so getting all of the dots connected is no small task. I can tell you from my experience at Shell, we did a lot of this, but it was generally just one-on-one. So it was a bilateral conversation. I would go talk to a community college and say, we're building a plant outside of Pittsburgh, which is really what we did. We went to the Penn State branch campus there and said, hey, we need some help training operators. And so they developed an operating certification program, and we hired people right out of there. But to do it at the scale of a city is really something very different. And the project that has been kicked off this year, really over the course of the last couple years in the partnership called the Connectivity Project, is doing that. It's looking at bringing whole communities together, academics, businesses, students, and really leveraging all of that to lift up and foster economic mobility. Maybe you want to fill in a few of the blanks on the Connectivity Project, Steve.
Yeah, so the basic premise is that we've got lots of training, right? We create lots of jobs, we create lots of students, right? And what's missing is the connection between the opportunities and the students, the pathways. We do a lot of training. We have a lot of systems, right? That are, everybody has a system, right? To connect people with opportunity in HCC, for example, or in other places. But they're all disparate. They're not connected together. Well, all the people who do those things, hire people, educate people, train people, are members of the partnership. And so the project that we're launching, the Connectivity Project, which is the work is being done on it right now, and we've been convening that group of people for 10 years now. So the time is now to really operationalize this thing. And so it's building the system that will connect, or the platform that will connect all the systems that exist out there today. We've mapped out what those are, not all of them exclusively, but the thing that really will make it work, what we've learned in Houston and talking to people who have gotten big things done here and used systems to do it, is that you've got to create that system with the people who you expect to use it. So you don't just go program the thing, you bring people together with the technology partner and we build it together. We spec it together, we make sure that the functionality is there, and that's where we need the business community. We need the business community in there. We've got the employers, we've got the educators, but we need people to show up and help us build this together, and I think we will get that. And if we do that, we'll have done something that nobody else has done, and other people are going to want to do it too. and we're happy to have that happen. It's a bit of working without a net. It's a big initiative for us. So in parallel to that, we're also building out complete pathways that are opportunities that will mobilize people. For example, electricians. We're going to run out of electricians with all the power demand and AI demand. Some projections, this won't turn out to be the case, but 400,000 new electricians we're going to need in the United States by 2031. You know how many we have? We've got 750. So it's not going to happen. But what that means is those electricians are going to get, it's not a 4-year degree. They're going to get trained. They're going to have time and grade. Their services are going to be more and more demand. Their wages are going to go up, and they can start their own businesses, right? That is a pathway. We need to identify those pathways with desperate employers. And both work efforts will feed the other. What we learn in building the project will also inform how we build those pathways and the other way around. I think we've got a real chance here, and we've got the right people involved. So it's an exciting prospect. It is working without a net a little bit, but. So you've also been involved in our inclusive leadership and opportunity work, co-chaired that committee for a while, and also at Shell, particularly in working with small businesses, helped develop some of our local small businesses and help lead them to opportunity. Why don't you talk about that work a little bit?
Yeah, so that was a real labor of love for me, and I had a chance to co-chair with the great Dr. Ruth Simmons as well as the great Dr. Melanie Johnson. My two co-chairs are both here, and really bring to bear, I think, a lot of the work that we had been doing at Shell in terms of sharing that more widely. But the partnership has made, really, I think, a great impact in so many ways. But just a couple of examples to share. When you talk about supplier diversity, which was a real hot topic a couple years ago and not as hot today, but should be, in my view, because when you talk about economic mobility, it has a really important impact on the economic mobility of different parts of this city, for example. So one example is we had a gentleman called Lee Jackson who owned one workboat in the Gulf of Mexico. This was probably about 10 years ago, and he came to Shell and he said, look, I've got one workboat and I just need that first contract. I've worked offshore my whole career. I went and bought this workboat and I need a contract. Shell signed that contract. It was a 2-year contract, and after 2 years he was able to buy another boat. And now he's actually the biggest workboat supplier in the Gulf Coast. So it's those sorts of breaks that people need oftentimes. It's not going out and finding a supplier that's owned by a minority or someone that's economically disadvantaged. Sometimes it's finding someone with a really great idea that you can give a leg up to. And so we've spent quite a bit of time sharing those stories, but also helping each other, company to company, organization to organization, with how that can actually improve the economic mobility of a city like Houston.
Absolutely, great story, great example, and that's work that we are continuing to do at the partnership as well. We've continued to progress that work, find the right ways to do it in the current political environment, but the work continues.
Yeah, and we have, I think it's work like that actually, in addition to some of the things we mentioned earlier, just about the young talent we have, the different dots we're connecting between academic institutions and students and jobs. It's that whole sort of ecosystem that winds up attracting companies like Lilly, for example, who's coming with a $6.5 billion investment. Maybe you want to spend a minute on how that transpired, because it was a really exciting announcement.
And it's a great Houston story and kind of shows you the kind of place that we are in many respects. So it kind of leads back. It starts with Amgen was looking at making an investment in Houston. It was going to be a $500 million investment. Everyone was really excited about it. We worked very hard. This was before my time, but I've heard the stories. We worked very hard on getting them to come here. They ended up going to the Research Triangle instead. And so this is one of the things I love about the partnership and about our community. We said, why? Why didn't you come here? And they explained, look, you've got the workforce, but they're not trained the way we need them trained. You said you would do that for us, but you're not training them now. So Brenda Hellier, the chancellor of San Jacinto College, one of our leading education leaders, really in the country, she said, well, what do you need? And they needed this particular training that's licensed out of Ireland called NIBRT. It was put together when Ireland was becoming a haven for pharmaceutical manufacturers, right? And so she licensed that curriculum and started developing the program and working on a campus to educate those workers, right? And in the meantime, we're recruiting. Eli Lilly, McCord Development was the lead there, Centerpoint, Commissioner Rodney Ellis was involved. There were some tax incentives that our Texas legislature had put in place in the 23 session. All of that came together, and we got a $6.5 billion investment at Generation Park. And later the week, right after that announcement, Brenda Hellier opened her biomanufacturing campus in Generation Park. You can point to where your workers are going to be educated. We can point you to where your workers are going to be educated. So we lost a $500 million investment, and we came back and got a $6.5 billion investment, and I think there's more to come. And the reason this was so important is because we've got this great med center. We educate a lot of doctors. We do a lot of groundbreaking research, but what we really didn't have was the for-profit life science sector. And so we leaned in hard on that as a strategic priority of the partnership. And not only do we have Eli Lilly coming here with $6.5 billion, we've got other inbound interest, and we've got 1,100 life sciences, for-profit life sciences firms that are now in Houston. And so it's just a great story about kind of who we are in this city. We don't take failure lightly. We turn it into success. So it's been a great story with a lot of people involved in it. All right, round of applause for that, okay? Sorry, I'm shameless sometimes. So Gretchen, now let's talk about energy. And let's start with your perspectives on global energy as it stands today.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there are so many different themes we could jump to in energy, but probably the biggest one right now, if you put aside geopolitics, which is also always sort of bubbling under the surface of energy, is the whole impact of AI and whether AI is going to be is the topic because of the amount of power demand that's going to come from the use of AI, or whether you're talking about AI and how it is likely to enable higher levels of efficiency, higher acceleration of technology. So the use of AI in terms of advancing energy, or the use of energy as it burdens as it's burdened with the power demands of AI. So I would say from a global perspective, that's probably one of the biggest themes out there, and you're starting to see, you're not even starting, you're seeing a lot of scrambling and a lot of churn and a lot of dynamic movement as value chains start to come together. But I would say one of the big unknowns is, what is that value chain really going to look like? So who is going to own the steel in the ground? I mean, all of a sudden companies like Meta and Apple and Google are putting big data centers in the ground. That's a completely different business model than they've been, and they've really been human capital companies up until now. So will they stay the owners of these big pieces of steel? Will they be the operators? Where's the money going to be made? Along what nodes? So you've got generation, then you've got transmission, then you've got data centers, then you've got who's going to use the data center, and how is all that going to come together? Totally unclear yet, and you see lots of companies kind of putting irons in the fire in various ways, my former company included, and then some of them taking out. So for example, Shell got into power generation, sold B2C and B2B. Shell's now gotten out of the B2C. That was actually a very different business model than B2C. than B2B, and so we've pulled back out of that. So I think you're going to continue to see a lot of volatility as companies kind of test where they think they're going to be able to have a competitive advantage, where they won't, where they're going to make money, where they want to contract out. So I think that's in my view, that's the big energy headline right now globally.
Absolutely. And so bring that now from global to Texas, and Houston specifically. What role do we have to play in Texas and in Houston, and what role do our companies have to play in meeting those demands, and what advantage do we have if we have one?
Well, I mean, I think Texas has a huge advantage. I mean, we are an energy state. Houston is the energy capital of the world, I would say. And I think not just hydrocarbon energy, but all different kinds of energy. And so I do believe that that's one thing we as Houstonians or Texans need to keep thinking about, is how do we maintain that advantage? And so certainly partnership's done some of that work, and you said the Energy Transition Initiative. But all of our, well, not all, maybe not all, but probably all of our companies, no matter whether you're in energy or finance or anything, you've got an energy a strategy of some sort, whether you're a consumer of energy, a producer of energy, a mover of energy. And I think that is what makes us a strong community, and one that will potentially continue to attract more investment in the energy space. I mean, we also have ERCOT, which is, those of you that know, ERCOT is much easier to actually permit and build new infrastructure in than other parts of the country. So we have some real advantages. We actually have a lot of renewable energy that's generated in the state. We have a lot of hydrocarbon energy that's generated in the state. And we have a ton of energy that flows in and out of, in terms of exports, that's exported from here. So we sit in the midst of, a real hub. And I think in my view, it's only going to get bigger.
Yeah, so very interesting. Like a couple of years ago, I saw a bubble chart that showed where all the data centers were going to be built. And they were clustered around Washington, D.C., and Boston, and New York, and California, and the Northwest. And I looked at that and I thought, y'all are a lot smarter than I am, but that is not going to happen. That's just not going to happen. How do you get the power infrastructure? How do you get the pipelines that you're going to need? How are you going to get that done in those places? Then a couple of weeks ago, I saw in the Wall Street Journal a new bubble chart of where the data centers are going to be, and there was this big blob on Texas, and it sort of makes a little more sense. But all right, if I can figure out, talk about working without a net here, if I can figure out how to work the app, we're going to take questions from you all. So let me pull up the Slido here. And my glasses. All right. Let's start with, here we go, first one. How do you see AI changing the workforce in the energy industry and in Houston at large?
Yeah, I mean, I think AI is probably already having an impact on the energy industry. And I think lots of companies are using AI in ways that they haven't before. I think all of them are probably using it very much in sort of a predictive maintenance way, but you're also starting to see them use it. I mean, some of the largest data sets in the entire world are seismic data sets, and so you're seeing companies use AI to process seismic data, which is going to, I think, really take a giant step forward in terms of how companies are able to analyze potential targets for exploration or development of hydrocarbons. I also think that, and we've talked even, I've seen some data in the news recently that there's, unemployment for 22 to 30-year-olds is actually disconnected from unemployment of the rest of the country. I think some of these entry jobs are going to be maybe not as needed or as useful. And so I know companies are grappling with, well, if we're not bringing kids out of school into these entry jobs to learn, how are we grooming the leaders of the future? So I think that's a little bit of a tangential to that question, but I think that's a real question that companies and frankly the community, the population is going to have to wrestle with. But I think AI, I think you're already seeing AI be applied in all sorts of different places. I mean, people are using them to read their emails and summarize their pre-read, and there's tons of ways to use it, and some of them are going to result in very big, I think, accelerations of technology. I think that's probably one of the most optimistic ways I can look at it. So we have a need to bring ourselves down the price curve on some forms of energy, some forms of efficiencies. I think AI has the potential to bring us down the price curve much more quickly.
Very good. Okay, Houston has a number of challenges as well. Traffic, crime, education come to mind. What makes you optimistic that we will successfully address these issues? So I'll take that one. You know, we are an optimistic bunch of people, and we also, when we have problems, we work hard on them. You know, the mayor says this all the time, you know, big cities have big problems. Good big cities acknowledge them and address them. And I think that's the kind of mayor he is. I think he's got he's a moderate Democrat mayor with a law and order focus and clean up the streets and pick up the trash and all that. And he has a good relationship with our red state leadership. And he is working on crime. He is working on those things. We have a lot going on in education reform in the city of Houston. This was one of the early homes of charter education. We now have charter schools. We now have ESAs out of the last legislature. We have a controversial but yet effective reform effort when you measure it in terms of how student performance is coming out in HISD, with the largest school district in the state of Texas. And we now have eliminated all the F-rated schools, not eliminated the schools, eliminated F ratings on schools, sorry. We have 74% of our schools are now A and B. They've more than doubled, right? In 2 years. Now, that's gonna cause a lot of noise, but it's hard to argue with those results. And so I think that's a characteristic of us and our community, that when we have big problems, we work on them. I mentioned resilience. You know, after every storm, we've invested, we've learned, we've invested, we've gotten better. And that's the way this place is. That's the way we are here. Okay. Oh, this is for you, Gretchen. What is something commonly misunderstood by policymakers in Washington about the energy business? And what is something commonly misunderstood by energy companies about Washington?
Wow. That's a good one. So I did, in my last job, have an opportunity to spend a decent amount of time in Washington. So I've talked to a lot of policymakers about energy. I would say the thing that always would maybe surprise me a little bit is that, frankly, a lot of our policymakers don't know much about energy. You know, they know a little bit, but not a lot, particularly ones that aren't from states that are energy states like Texas. And so a lot of times I would wind up explaining things to them about energy, whether it was about how tariffs might impact our investment, whether it was about how clean energy credits might help or not help. You know, when the Inflation Reduction Act was passed, very few people understood it. Frankly, there was so much in there that it took all of us a long time to kind of really understand it. But having conversations about that, you know, and most policymakers, in my view, I would always tell people, they would ask me, like, wow, what's it like going to Washington? I always left Washington more optimistic than I got there, because most of the people I went to meet, and it didn't matter which side of the aisle they were on or where they were from in the country, they really want to do good work. Like, they're really wanting to do the good work. Now, and they would say things. They would say things to me in a one-on-one conversation that showed me they were curious, that they were interested. And then, you know, you see them in front of a camera and they might say something a little bit different. So, but I genuinely felt optimistic after I left, because people are curious. They do want to understand, but many of them don't. So a lot of my time would be spent just educating, and frankly, a lot of my DC team that was there, that was their whole job, really, was meeting with staff and helping them understand. what did Washington people think? I think because there's a lack of understanding, quite often they think that, in particular, the previous administration thought that sort of renewables could happen like that. I mean, we can just knock out, get rid of these hydrocarbons, convert to renewables. You guys are dragging your feet and it's like, look, and in fact, I worked for a company that was really leaning in, still is, I think, on the energy transition. It can't, our whole energy system is built for hydrocarbons. And so we have built quite a bit of our energy system to use renewables. That will continue to happen. I believe the energy transition is going to continue, but it can't happen overnight. It can't happen, even in a year or two. And policy does matter in that space. Policy does matter in that space. So those were probably the biggest, the two biggest misconceptions, was that there was somehow an industry effort to thwart all renewables. And in fact, I think lots of companies in the industry are investing in renewables, are investing in energy efficiency, and want to invest. Yeah, so those were a lot of my time was spent dispelling those myths.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have a question about NVIDIA and Foxconn coming to Houston. Is Houston ready to supply the needed labor, knowledge, language, cultural awareness, et cetera, to support their manufacturing? Are there partnerships between Houston schools, the city, Foxconn, and NVIDIA? So yes, all the way across. I mean, first of all, Foxconn is already here, and they have about 2,000 workers here already. They're going to add another 1,000 workers. And Inventec is coming here, another Taiwanese company. And they have announced, they being Foxconn, that they are going to train their workers here to do the advanced manufacturing in support of AI. And that is huge for our city. We have about a 250,000 strong workforce in manufacturing already. We have the Port of Houston. That doesn't matter as much here because it's not bulky, but we have a lot of logistics. We have a labor force that's already trained in manufacturing. They've gotten, we connected them. They can find their own way here, but they're connected with Lone Star. They're connected with HCC. They're working. Lone Star has a person dedicated to Foxconn to make sure that they get what they need out of the community colleges in order to train their workers. So those partnerships are forming. They're committed to educating here, and that's a gateway for a whole new sector to grow in our city. The manufacturing that's going to need to be done in support of AI, and I would add to that, in support of power as well. Quanta is based here, NRG, Calpine is based here. We have the ability to win in that area in Houston. Okay, you want to talk about World Cup? World Cup's coming to Dallas and Houston. I can do it if you want. Where is it? World Cup's coming to Dallas and Houston. Two great cities, and I think we're going to do well with it. But it is amazing. I'll talk about Houston. We have 5 first-round matches and then 2 knockout, 1 round of 32 and round of 16 knockout matches. Each one of those matches is a multiple of Super Bowl viewership. So the Super Bowl, when Chiefs played at 130 million viewers, it's like 180 million for each match in the World Cup. So think about that. We really are going to be on the world stage here, expecting 500,000 visitors. Now, if that frightens you into putting your house on Airbnb for the whole, 40-day period, it's not going to be 500,000 at the same time, okay? There are going to be people coming in and out. A lot of work has been done by Chris Canetti and his team on, and I'm sure in Dallas as well, to build the capability and the infrastructure that's going to be needed to accommodate that. What Chris Canetti will say, and I'll say it here, is we've got this. You all focus on what you can do to make this the biggest thing you can for Houston or for Dallas, for the companies in it, because you're going to have an opportunity here to have the world see what we are and what we can do. So that's our challenge. Make the most of it. Let's see, maybe one more question. Okay, I've combined 2. As the energy industry is going through consolidation, what impact does that have on Houston? And then there was another question, what do you expect the energy industry in Houston to look like in 2050?
Oh, wow. 2050, that's pretty far away. Well, I mean, consolidation's nothing new for the energy industry. I mean, it's been happening since I joined 35 years ago. So I think that will continue to happen. The economic environment sometimes is favorable for that, sometimes it's not. Right now, we haven't seen actually a ton of it recently, but we probably will. You know, I don't know what's going to happen with interest rates, but sometimes that, you know, some sense of stability in the economy usually triggers more consolidation to happen. But that's going to stay with us. Consolidation is just, I think, part of the industry. I would say, what's the industry going to look like in 2050? Well, I think my own view is that the energy transition is here to stay, and we may not be talking about it the same way we were talking about it a couple years ago, but it's here, it's happening. Companies still have their investments, companies still have their goals to reduce emissions. I think consumers still have a desire to do something in that space too, and so that will continue. So I would say 25 years from now, we will see a different energy mix. I think we will see a cleaner energy mix. You know, will carbon capture finally be, you know, released from the handcuffs that's holding it back right now, which have a lot to do with policy and economics? Who knows? I'd love to think that they would, because I think that's still an important part of our technology portfolio that hasn't fully been leveraged yet. But I would like to think that in 25 years we'll have a cleaner energy mix. We'll still probably have some of the same players in there making a different energy offering to customers, and I'm sure I'll have a lot of new players in there too.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Gretchen, for all of those answers. And now we're going to stay on time. I'm going to introduce our Fed chair. So Fed President and Dallas Fed President and CEO Lori Logan, welcoming you back to Houston. Is going to provide some closing comments this evening. Lori joined the Dallas Fed in 2022, immediately launched her 360 listening tour, thank you for that, to visit and learn from communities throughout her district. Her first visit on that listening tour was to Houston, which I think speaks very well of her judgment and character. You wrote that for me. I didn't, my Dallas friends, I did not mean that the way it came out. Well, maybe I did, but no. Prior to joining the Dallas Fed, Lori worked for more than 20 years in the markets group at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. As executive vice president over the markets group, she managed the balance sheet and open market operations on behalf of the Federal Reserve System. Please join me in welcoming our host here in the Houston branch and Dallas Fed President, Lori Logan. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that introduction and your confidence in my judgment. I really appreciate that. But don't tell any other part of the district. Good evening, everyone. And for those of you who are joining us this evening who aren't from the district and from Houston, I just want to welcome you here. It's great to have you in the district, and great to be able to see you tonight. My role tonight, I think, is just to close us out, but also in the spirit of Thanksgiving. And I know all of us are thinking about our friends and family as we move into the holiday week, are thinking about what we are grateful for. And this evening, I just wanted to take a moment to express our own gratitude on behalf of the Dallas Fed for so many of you here. First and foremost, I just want to express my thanks to Gretchen for joining us this evening and sharing her perspective with us. I think, as you've all seen tonight, and I think many of you who know her well know her expertise on global energy markets is immense. And I'm grateful for her contributions to the Dallas Fed's Energy Advisory Council and your friendship, and look forward to seeing all the new work that you do and continuing to stay in close contact with us here at the Houston branch. I also want to thank Steve for your excellent moderating, and I also was happy to get the World Cup question, so I know more about what to expect. And also your involvement with us at the Dallas Fed. The Houston community is just so fortunate to have your leadership of the Greater Houston Partnership, You forged a path forward that really brings together so many different parts of the community, the academic community, the policymakers, and the business leaders. And as I travel the district, the Greater Houston Partnership really is best in class. And I know many are looking to understand how it works so well here in this part of our district. And I know you're working hard to continue to grow that leadership. I also wanted to thank Darren, our Senior Vice President and Regional Executive here in Houston. Darren always sets the bar high for all of us at the Dallas Fed. Appreciate your opening remarks, but more importantly, thanks for bringing the community together here this evening and all the work you do in representing the Dallas Fed here in Houston. And I also just wanted to thank all of you for being here and for being part of our Global Perspective series, as well as our work at the Federal Reserve. You know, as Darren noted in his remarks, he talked about the 5 functions that the Federal Reserve does to support a strong economy for everyone in the United States. And one of those functions, perhaps most well-known responsibility, of course, is to carry out monetary policy to pursue the 2 goals established by Congress: maximum employment and price stability. And when the Fed was established over 100 years ago, Congress recognized the critical importance of having a central bank that was not concentrated in Washington or concentrated in New York, not in the political, not in the financial hubs of our country, but more importantly represented all across our country. Instead, they designed this incredible regional structure that we have today with 12 regional reserve banks, each representing their part of the country. And I think this is so important because that federal structure allows us to best serve the public by engaging widely and deeply with all the business and industry and communities that make up each of our districts. And it's these regular engagements that provide me and all of my FOMC colleagues with valuable economic insights, which paint a much more colorful and cohesive view of the economy. Now, ahead of each FOMC meeting, I know many of you here know this, but my team and I are in contact with just hundreds of local leaders and businesses. And we do this through roundtable discussions, a lot of formal outreach calls, and participating in many events like this evening. We survey hundreds of contacts in the banking, manufacturing, services, retail, and energy sectors, to hear how those industries are experiencing the economy. And this is all in addition to the information we gather from our board of directors here in Houston, in Dallas, in El Paso, and in San Antonio. This week, we wrapped up our final 360 listening tour stop of the year with visits to Galveston and Houston. I had the chance to meet with leaders in the aerospace industry. I toured the Port of Galveston, and I heard directly from community leaders on the local economy. And my intent of this 360 listening tour was to meet leaders from across the region while familiarizing myself with the district, being new to the district 3 years ago, and to really understand what makes this district so dynamic and so diverse. It was meant to take a year. It was going to take a year. That quickly changed. I realized just how big and how dynamic we are, and now in my 3rd year, it's just an ongoing part of the work we do each and every day. Each visit's important, and each allows us to go far beyond the official data statistics and allow us to see different areas of our district and understanding how they're faring in the economy. These insights are especially valuable as the FOMC makes decisions on the stance of monetary policy. The effective rate changes takes time to play out. And so it's important to think about where the economy's headed and not just where it is right now. And those local insights that we gain on those trips are so helpful in that process because they're much more timely than the official data that help us understand the nuances and the reasons behind the official data. And during times where the national data may not be available, we still have a wide range of alternative data sources. And they continue to provide visibility of the state of our economy. The Fed is not flying blind. We have an incredible rich amount of information for many of you here about how the economy is faring. Tonight was really a special night. We invited the community into the bank to hear timely conversations on the economy, how local leaders are experiencing it, and sharing their insights. We relaunched this Global Perspective series and to be able to partner with our community partners to host these events. As I traveled the district in my first year, I heard everywhere, bring back global perspectives. It was one that I think many in our community appreciated, and I'm glad to be able to continue it. And we appreciate the opportunity to grow our local presence, bring new perspectives to the FOMC table, and to learn about economic conditions all across our district. So I just want to thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you, Steve and Gretchen. And I wish all of you a very happy holiday season, and I hope to continue to engage with you in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you all very much for being here.